Hello, everyone. And after a short and unplanned respite, welcome back to the Cybersecurity Bridge. I'm Jon Oltsik, your host. If you haven't seen the Cybersecurity Bridge podcast, each episode is broken into three sections. The first section, we talk about the present state of a particular area of cybersecurity. The second section, we talk about the future state of that area. And the third is the Cybersecurity Bridge, where we talk about how we get from here to there. And I'm honored to have the father of Zero Trust, and at this stage, maybe even the grandfather of Zero Trust, Jon Kindervag, as my guest. Jon, introduce yourself to our audience.
Hey, John, good to see you again. I'm Jon Kindervag. I'm the chief evangelist for Illumio, and I am typically people call me the godfather of Zero Trust. That's a name that Chase Cunningham gave me. But I did create this when I was working at Forrester Research as an analyst for 8.5 years. So that's where John and I first met. We both come from an analyst background. Back in the good old days of being an analyst, I think we were there at the golden era of the analyst business, and we've been around for a long time, and we've had some hot takes, mostly about F-holes on B.B. King's guitars. So I don't know if we're going to touch on that this time or not.
I'm going to have to start a guitar podcast to do that, but I appreciate that. And the golden age, I'll take it too. So before we start, Jon, are you ready to play cybersecurity trivia?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I crafted this one especially for you. So
okay.
You talk about Zero Trust. And then if you know the industry, you think of BeyondCorp from Google, which was started in 2010 in response to the Aurora attack.
I think Google was around 2013, 2014. It's a little bit later. 2010 was when I wrote No More Chewy Centers.
I think that's when they started the project internally. But here's the question. So it was an internal project for a while, but then they publicly announced or publicly shared the details of that. And so the question is, when did that happen? Was it 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, or 2021?
Geez, it would have had to have been 2017, because I remember when the CIO came out and said everybody should do Zero Trust. And then the BeyondCorp white paper came out right after that. But I think I was still at Forrester, and I left Forrester in 2016. So I'm a little unsure of the date, but that's just because I'm old and I'm unsure of all dates. Like, what is today? What day is today? I have no idea.
As am I, Jon. But according to my extensive research, it was 2018 in July. In 2019, Google announced that they were extending it to their public services. And in 2021, they introduced the Enterprise Edition. So a little bit of background. You're the godfather. So that's a small detail. But let's get into our discussion. So the present state of Zero Trust. You came up with this, and so you've seen a lot of years of it. Where are we today?
Yeah, today we're at Zero Trust being a global movement, right? That just has an insatiable demand for people wanting to do it, but being somewhat confused about it. A lot of that because of vendor hype that has kind of confused everybody and everything. But it is a global movement. It has taken me around the world several times, and if you remember when I first published that paper in 2010, people told me I was an idiot, and that was the stupidest thing they'd ever read, and it was never going to go anywhere. And then President Biden issued an executive order in 2021, and now every single federal government agency has a Zero Trust program management office and a program manager and a Zero Trust budget. So I just came back from meeting with an agency within the U.S. Department of War, as we say now, I learned. And it's all over the federal government, and it's all over the world. So this year I've been to Sweden, I've been to London a few times. I've been to the Netherlands. I've been to Taipei. I've been to, all over the place. And so it's a global movement, and it is a cybersecurity strategy that is really resonating up to leadership.
And so if you had to characterize what's changed in that year, so 2010 to, so 15 years of experience, what's changed technically? What's changed attitudinally? What do you think?
I think it's that it caught the attention of people who are strategic and grand strategic leaderships. Zero Trust was designed to resonate up to the highest levels of any organization strategically, but tactically it was decoupled from the products because I knew the products would always get better and better, but I knew the strategy wouldn't change. So it exists at two levels: strategic and tactical. And one military officer on LinkedIn said the big thing John brought to cybersecurity with Zero Trust is the concept of grand strategy. No one had ever talked about grand strategy before. And so I spent a lot of time with grand strategic actors, admirals and generals and CEOs and members of boards of directors and people that typically even CISOs don't get to talk to, right? Because they want a strategic vision that they can then drive down and that can be tactically implementable using commercially available technology at whatever state that technology is in at any given time.
So when I was an analyst way back when, before I retired, and still kind of semi-active, but what we always found was that there was a tactical use case, and then some organizations move that onto a strategic initiative. So are you still seeing that? And what percentage of organizations would you characterize as taking that next step? And what percentage would you say are still sort of thinking of this as a tactical step and that's it?
Well, I only have the people that I work with to gauge that on, and people tend to want to work with me when they want to have it be more of a strategic initiative in their organization. So I probably have a very limited worldview compared to other people who only deal with tactical actors. But I think probably there's generally a strategic initiative somewhere up there. It's just often not seen by some of those other folks. So it just depends on the point of view, whatever lens you're looking through. And the lens I get to look through is pretty broad because, I just came back from a DOW event, and I was speaking to some people who were very, very tactical, wanted to get into the weeds, and some people who were very, very strategic, who were high level leaders. And so there's a sort of a different set of messaging and a different way to kind of approach it with each of them. And but I believe that really the more time you can spend with leadership, the more you can change the incentives. And I think one of the fundamental problems in cybersecurity is that we have bad incentives where we're incentivizing people not to do things because we spend so much time looking to blame somebody if something goes wrong, that if somebody tries to do something good, they're afraid they're going to get in trouble. So they're managing their own downside risk instead of the upside potential of the organization that they work for.
So what is the, if you thought about a first step for Zero Trust, what's the common first step that you see?
Well, the first step is involved in the 5-step model of how you deploy Zero Trust, right? So I was honored to be appointed to President Biden's NSTAC and National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee. There was a subcommittee on Zero Trust. We published a report in 2022, and I was invited to be on that. I got to be on the subcommittee. I got to be a briefer, and I got to be one of the primary authors. And in that, I codified something that I had been talking about for a long time, which is this 5-step model of how you deploy Zero Trust. And the first thing is to define the protect surface, asking what are we trying to protect, right? If we think about cybersecurity is supposed to be about protecting something. And most people are very product focused and not protection focused. And so they don't know what they're trying to protect. And so you see you see people starting to understand this concept of protect surface, inverting the attack surface, getting it down to a small thing, a data element, an application, a particular asset like an OT asset, or maybe a service like DNS, and putting it into a protect surface. And just recently, the Department of Homeland Security has added the protect surface concept to their zero trust guidance, which is the first time that the government has really focused on that. So we're starting to see that protect surface idea resonate, because that's something that any leader can know. They know what they want to protect, right? And after the OPM data breach, the Oversight and Government Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives actually came out and asked OMB to mandate zero trust for all federal agencies. And Chairman Chafis, who is a grand strategic actor, or was at the time, he's no longer in Congress, but he wrote a byline article on zero trust, and he said zero trust would have profoundly limited the attacker's ability to move within OPM's network and access such sensitive data. Now, he's not a tactical actor. He doesn't understand anything about IT probably, but he does understand the importance of the data that was stolen by a nation state actor.
I love the concept of the protect surface, John. Is that something that you're seeing more often? I mean, I guess it is, because that's your model.
Yeah, that's my model. And I tell people that if somebody's talking to you about zero trust and they're not talking about a protect surface, they don't understand zero trust. They're trying to sell you a product, right?
Right.
And they're using zero trust as a marketing term for the product. But the whole point of products, and I try to explain this to people, is products exist to enforce policy, which is binary. All you can do is allow or deny. So, we have to know what we're going to protect in order to know what product to put there, so we can know what policy to instantiate, so we can know who should actually have access to that protect surface. And it simplifies things for organizations who adopt it, because now they can focus on one really small part of it. Like if I'm a bank, I might focus on my ATM infrastructure, or my PCI infrastructure, or my mainframes that are processing my transactions. So there's 3 different protect surfaces that they would be focusing on. But where people fall down and fail is they try to do zero trust all at once for everything. And
Yes.
to paraphrase Frederick the Great, small minds try to protect everything and therefore protect nothing.
That's a good one too. And yeah, there's way too much zero trust washing in the industry. I have a zero trust product, or I have a zero trust platform.
Right.
I hear that a lot. But I love what you said, because it puts it in a business context. What do you want to protect? I mean, a CEO will know that, as well as a CISO, certainly more than that. So that's good. Let's move on to the future. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you the AI question du jour. So where does AI fit into the zero trust model in your eyes?
Yeah, I actually wrote about this for the Financial Times of London. There's an article called "Why I'm Not Losing Sleep Over AI," because I think AI, there's 5 steps of zero trust, right? I've already mentioned protect surface, define the protect surface. Second, map the transaction flows. I do a lot about what I call cybersecurity cartography, understanding the map, right? Because if you fight a battle, you need a map. A map is a weapon that tells you how to win. And then the third step is, that's where the architecture is. Those 2 things will tell you what controls you need. Step 4 is the policy that you're going to instantiate in the control. But step 5 is monitor and maintain, where we take all the telemetry, we ingest it. That's where we're going to use AI. And we are using AI at the company I work for, right there in step 5, to bubble up stuff that you need to look at and take care of immediately. And I think this gives us a huge advantage. I think it actually allows us to become an anti-fragile system. The zero trust is an anti-fragile system in that case. So everybody else is talking about resilience. I'm talking about antifragility, which is a term coined by Taleb, who wrote The Black Swan. He wrote a book called Antifragile, which I think is the most important cybersecurity book that's not about cybersecurity. It's about critical thinking and about how to make systems really, really, really powerful. And he says, a robust system, or a system that that has these ways of being resilient, they withstand the attack, but then they stay the same afterwards. And an anti-fragile system goes beyond that. It gets better and better over time. So he gives the human body as an example, right? We're coming up on the holiday season, so we're going to eat too much, and everybody is going to need to lose weight. I mean, what's the number one New Year's resolution? You're going to join a gym and lose weight, right? So you restrict calories, you exercise. It doesn't destroy your body. It doesn't break it down. It makes it stronger and stronger as it adapts and recovers, because your body is an anti-fragile system. And we can do that in zero trust to make a zero trust protects a particular protect surface anti-fragile by leveraging the telemetry, analyzing it with AI, and then automating the response so that we can be ahead of the speed of the attacker, which is really, really fast right now.
Yes, and I would imagine, given your new role or your current role at Illumio, that part of the AI enablement would be microsegmentation. Like, we could take that to a level that maybe Illumio has done, but most companies haven't done yet. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah. I mean, our AI does auto labeling. It suggests policies. It points out traffic flows that look particularly risky, and it has the ability to automate quarantining of traffic that appears to be bad traffic, right? And we're just at the beginning of that phase. That's just a 2025 initiative. So where it's going to go is anybody's guess. But my favorite quote about AI from an AI expert that I ran into in Sweden a few weeks ago, he said, "The difference between me and everybody else in the world is I'm a chapter ahead in the book." Right? That's how I guess limited our knowledge is about what AI is going to do. There's a lot of hypotheses about it. I'm particularly worried about agentic AI being able to become essentially insider threats. So that's something that I'm looking at right now. But I think AI actually gives us an advantage over the attackers if we monitor and maintain in a zero trust environment the right way. Now, in a traditional old school network that's flat and allows anybody to have access to everything, then you're kind of toast, no matter whether you have AI or not. I mean, I know of one company, they have 4 million firewall rules. I don't think AI is going to help much there. There's going to be a lot of open doors that the attackers can choose from if you've got 4 million rules.
Yeah, they need something else. They need, what was that firewall that there was a mid 2020s thing?
Those things are all coming. They're all coming back actually now. A lot of things that were old are coming back again because they were
enabled by AI,
hard.
right?
You're right. They're enabled by AI, so you don't have to manually sift through that data. I remember a big bank had one person who managed the firewall rules, and he audited firewall rules every day, and he got through like 10 a day.
Yeah.
Right? Well, computationally with AI, you could get through 4 million in a day.
That's true. And you just brought up something I was going to ask you, so I will ask you, and that is the intersection between zero trust and cyber resilience. Cyber resilience is also somewhat of a buzz term, but some organizations and certainly the federal government is taking it seriously. So where do you see that intersection?
Well, I mean, that's what I was saying about robust or resilient systems are systems that resist resist the stressor, but they stay the same. So I want to go beyond resilience into antifragility, right? And so when I give my speeches, I'm talking about antifragility and introducing it to most people for the first time. Although I did brief a 3-star general, Air Force general recently, and he was in the middle of reading Antifragile. So we went off on a tangent about the concept of antifragility and how important that is in every sector of human experience, whether it's your human health or whether it's, kinetic warfighting or whether it's cybersecurity.
Right. Jon, let's move on to the third section of our wonderful discussion. and talk about getting from the present to the future. And the first thing I saw when I was reviewing my notes in the DoD specification for Zero Trust, there are 152 specific activities. That kind of signals complexity to me. So is Zero Trust getting too complex, or am I missing something?
I think some people are making Zero Trust too complex. It's really simple. It's that 5-step model. As it relates to the DOW, Department of War, the CISA maturity models, which are those two things that we're talking about, I've done a lot of work for those organizations because those are really reporting infrastructures, right? Not necessarily how you should build a Zero Trust environment. So if you build the Zero Trust environment using the 5-step model, and then you have individual protect surfaces, and then you score those protect surfaces using the maturity model I created at Forrester, which is also in the presidential NSTAC report. Then you can take that data and you can format it into a report that shows how well you're doing against all those 152, as one general said to me, points of light, right? So you can figure out how to do that. So that's, and I think there's some people trying to change that. The DHS, Department of Homeland Security, just recently is coming out with new guidance about Zero Trust that's different than all the other federal agencies because it's protect surface focus versus product focus. So all the things that you've seen so far are product focus. You need this product, you need this product, which a lot of people like because it gives them check boxes. But at the same time, I think they end up overcomplicating it and overbuying technology because they think, I had one guy tell me he thinks he needs those 152 controls or activities everywhere, right? And that's not true. It has to be designed based upon what you're protecting. And once you know what you're protecting, and if you see the map that I already talked about, if you look at any war movie, they're always looking at maps, right? Why? Because it tells them where to go, where the enemy is, how to win. A map is 4 sides and an X, and you need to know what that X is, and the X is the thing you're trying to protect. And so if you look at it from that perspective, then step 3 is all the stuff that's contained in a lot of these other guidances that people have come out with. And they started with step 3 because generally, historically, we started with buy a product and then figure out what to do with it. And that's why a lot of things failed, because no one knew what to do with it because they didn't know what they were trying to protect. So I get calls from people all the time. I bought gadget X, widget Y. What do I do with it? I don't know. What are you trying to protect? Well, we haven't thought about that yet, right? And so until you think about that, you're never going to successfully protect anything.
John, I'm reminded of that Bruce Schneier quote that security is a process, not a product. And I guess he probably said that 30 years ago when we were both starting in security, but it's still true today. In the model that we talked about, the DoD model, the CISA model, there are 7 pillars: user, device, app and workload, data, network and environment, automation and orchestration, visibility, and analytics. Which of those most concerns you as you look forward?
None of them particularly concern me. It's the idea that you have these pillars and you're supposed to do them all at once for everything, and and people tend to do it sequentially. So they'll start with identity and try to fix all of identity before they move on to the next pillar. And that's not how you should do it. So what I do is I for those clients, I have a thing called, I show protect surface 1, and it's going to have some of each of those pillars in there based upon what I'm going to try to protect. It's going to have identity and network and device. It's going to have all that stuff in there, but I need to design it in a way that protects the DAS element, the data application asset or service, that I'm focusing on in that particular protect surface. So, I just have an orthogonal line across those pillars where I show here's protect surface 1, protect surface 2, all the way up to protect surface N, however many you have. And that's really resonating with a lot of people because they were struggling with this. How do I how do I do this? Because I'm trying to fix all of identity all at once. And well, you can't do that, right? And so uh, focus on the thing you're trying to protect. The thing you're trying to protect is going to have identity elements. Those things are going to be consumed in policy and zero trust, but you're going to have identity elements in there. And so, but you're going to know what identity element is important for that particular protect surface. That's why the protect surface concept is actually fundamental to zero trust.
And it would seem to me that a best practice would be to find maybe not the most, but a critical protect surface, secure that with zero trust, a zero trust initiative, learn from that experience, and then apply it more broadly. It seems pretty simple, but that's what you're saying to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a thing called the zero trust learning curve that I talk about in every presentation, where I start with learning protect surfaces. Early on, we focus on things that have very low value. So if you screw up, it's like street ball, no harm, no foul, right? And then you focus on some things that are a little bit more critical or sensitive in terms of the protect surface, but still not mission critical. And those are called protect surfaces. I got that term practice from Tony Scott, the former CIO of the federal government, who likes to say you get to zero trust in Carnegie Hall the same way you practice, practice, practice. And then after that, you focus on the high value assets or the keys to the kingdom, whatever you call them. I used to think you should start with those high value assets. And then I found out that nobody knows how those things work. And so they're easy to break. And so that's why I said learn, practice, and then focus on those high value assets.
Now, I tend to ask a question like this to all my guests, and it's around skill sets. When you talk about zero trust, you're talking about the business, you're talking about applications, you're talking about users' data, basically the 7 pillars that I talked about. Is there a skill set for that overall encompassing zero trust environment? Are there certifications or educational components that you would recommend? What do you think?
I typically recommend that people get involved with the Cloud Security Alliance Zero Trust working group, which I'm a part of. And then there is a certification, CCZT, Certificate of Competency in Zero Trust. That's the only certification that I currently hold. I've given them all up since then, in the past. But that's a good place to start, because what Cloud Security Alliance is it's vendor neutral, and it's not, specifically focused on a particular government initiative. So it's really the organization taking zero trust out to the rest of the world. And so if I was wanting to learn more about it, I would become very involved in that. I mean, you can do a lot of things on it. Can I pitch somebody's book while I'm here?
Absolutely.
So
No rules, John.
Friend of mine, Josh Woodruff wrote a book called Agentic AI and Zero Trust. I don't know if you can see that. And I wrote the foreword to it. Yeah. And
Okay.
we became friends through the Cloud Security Alliance Zero Trust Working Group. And so he turned the knowledge he gained from that working group into a quite wonderful book, the first book on agentic AI and zero trust. So I think go work with the Cloud Security Alliance, where we have hundreds of volunteers who work on these projects, and you can go as little or deep into it as you want.
And one of the things that I hear often is about the risks around agentic AI. So I would assume you imagine that agentic AI will have an identity, or AI agents will have an identity. They'll have access privileges. We will trust but verify. So all of the things that zero trust assumes for people having access to assets will be similar for agentic or agents.
I hope we will, although we verify and never trust in zero trust. We don't trust but verify. But
okay,
that's a longer story about a misunderstanding of a joke Ronald Reagan made in the 80s. Yeah, I would hope we would do that. I think we won't. I think people are so in love with AI that they're just going to deploy these agents everywhere and let them run wild. And we're going to see a bunch of them become insider threats. They're going to attack us. and it's going to look like it's coming from a particular user when it's not. It's the agent itself. I mean, agency in computer science is you're giving agency, you're agentic or agency. You're giving agency over the kernel, over the ability to execute, uh, you know, a call or a system or a service or whatever you're going to do. So it can become independent of the actual user, and the user may not know that that agent is firing off something. And so if I'm an attacker, I'm going to be looking for those agents, just like we've already seen with this Claude thing that Claude claims that they stopped.
That's right.
But we're going to see that stuff happening because then I don't have to compromise credentials. I just have to get access to the agent, and then I can make the agent do all kinds of things. And everybody's like, it's cool because it's the agent, and we're trying to become agentic, and it's like everything else. There's the law of unintended consequences comes out. Marie Curie wanted to, discover radiation for X-rays in healthcare. They ended up killing her, but then it also led to the atomic bomb. So, there's always a law of unintended consequences. What is meant for good can also be used for bad.
Very true. And so real quick, do you see zero trust as part of any kind of a regulatory demand or regulatory initiative moving forward, either here or in the EU or somewhere else?
There's talk about it. I don't know if it will be or not. I think one of the buzzes that's happening is that in the world of cyber insurance, some of the cyber insurance companies are talking about giving organizations a break in their policy costs if they can have a demonstrable zero trust environment. Now, how you demonstrate that, I kind of know how you can do it, but
yeah,
a lot of people don't. So it would be that's a bigger challenge because everybody will say, well, I bought product X, so I'm zero trusty. And that is not a true statement.
Yeah,
as you and I well know.
That's true. And I sat through a cyber insurance presentation a couple of years ago, and they were giving breaks to people who bought products in the upper right quadrant of the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Good luck with that. That doesn't really mean anything. No offense to Gartner, but that's not a rubber stamp for good security. So,
well, I'm the only analyst in the history of Forrester who managed to go through an entire career and not do a wave.
I never did a wave, John, but there was no wave when I was there. So
right. But there were waves, and there were lots of them, and I just refused to do them.
Oh, that's
not the right way to look at cybersecurity, right? I mean,
it's not the right way to look at anything except profitability, but that's another story. So let me conclude because we're out of time. But I asked this question of everyone, and I think it's a good one, and that is, John, you've got the audience, and you can offer them your best advice for what should they be thinking about, what should they be prioritizing with regard to zero trust.
Step one, know what you need to protect, right? If you don't know, it goes back to know yourself. Was that Plato? Know yourself? Or Socrates or one of those guys, but know yourself. Well, know your network, know your environment, know what you need to protect, know what's important, know what's critical. If you don't know that, then you're going to be surprised one day when it gets toasted and you wonder, how did all this stuff get stolen? I mean, I can't tell you how many times people have thought everything's working fine, and then the government comes in and asks, how come your important intellectual property was found on this server in this foreign country? Well, that can't be. Everything's working fine.
Everything's always working fine. But John, the father, grandfather, godfather of zero trust, it was a pleasure seeing you and a pleasure talking to you. I appreciate your time. Thanks again.
You betcha, my friend. Always a joy to talk to you. And I hope to see you at some conference somewhere sometime in the upcoming future.
I do too. And if I don't see you, happy holidays, happy new year. And to my audience, stay tuned in 2 weeks for another episode of the Cybersecurity Bridge.